So thank you all for joining us today. Trisha shared some great information about how trees in our cities can provide some substantial stormwater benefits. And those benefits, or these trees, can augment a community's stormwater management plan if managed properly. And so that was a good segue to this presentation, because as Trisha's team was developing their work, Julie Maywater and myself and our team at the Forest Service was developing a resource manual for urban forest managers. So hopefully that we could talk with stormwater engineers, and the two professional groups could come together to maximize stormwater benefits using our urban forest. So that is the purpose of what I'm going to talk about today. Like I said, we developed this resource for urban forest managers, natural resource managers, to provide some simple rules of thumb to quantify some of the stormwater benefits that trees provide. Gives strategies to manage the urban forest to maximize stormwater benefits. And we also provided in this resource information, case studies to provide to planners so that they can see where some of this stuff is, or where some of these other communities are using trees to quantify benefits. So I'm not going to get into all of the sections of this resource, but the resource does look at rainfall retention, intensity under canopy, rainfall intensity reduction, infiltration of stormwater into soils, transpiration. We do talk a little bit about some of the stormwater nutrient uptake and loading. And then we have those tree crediting programs in Minnesota, Vermont, and the Chesapeake Bay watershed. But I think we're just going to talk in this section about retention, intensity reduction, and transpiration, and how we can use some of these rules of thumb, and how we're using some of these rules of thumb here in Nashville. So let's start with rainfall retention. So as Trisha mentioned, that leaf area drives this rainfall retention. As rain falls, it hits that surface area up in the canopy, and a percentage of it is retained there in the canopy. In his dissertation, Richard Keim talked about different storage strategies that trees use, the static storage and dynamic storage. Static storage is what is used for rainfall retention. It's that water held in the tree canopy after a rainfall event. It never becomes stormwater runoff. It eventually evaporates. And so from the research, there has been this depth of water storage that has been developed. And so the average depth of water storage on leaf surface area is about 0.2 millimeters per square meter of leaf area. And I know that it seems like such a small amount, but when you think about you've got millions of trees in a city, and you've got a lot of leaf surface area up there, you know, it can add up. And as Trisha said, these large trees can have a lot of leaf surface area. It can provide some substantial storage of rainfall. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of some of the research that John Hathaway is doing at University of Tennessee here in the East to go along with some of Trisha's numbers, who looked at worldwide research. Here in Tennessee, where we have, 50 inches of rainfall, what John Hathaway found was that the pine were intercepting on an annual basis 50% of that rainfall under canopy, which is really impressive. And then the deciduous trees were anywhere from 25% to 33%. So you know, it can provide some good storage. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how we're using some of these numbers here in Nashville, looking at our combined sewer system. So our combined sewer system here around the downtown area is almost 8,000 acres. And we have done tree canopy studies, and the most current tree canopy cover numbers is about 23% in this rainfall retention or combined sewer system. So using our street tree inventory, we were able to estimate this leaf area index, which talks about the volume of canopy cover we have in our canopy cover. And we estimate that to be about 4.5%. And so if we multiply all these numbers together, we can estimate our leaf surface area in our combined sewer system. And it's a little over 8,000 acres. And once we convert that to square meters, we can multiply it by that depth of water storage to get at a volume of water that is retained every time it rains. And so what we find with our current tree canopy cover is that every time it rains, the trees in our combined sewer system are retaining about 1.7 million gallons of water. And so if we could put a cost on that, if it costs us half a penny per gallon to treat this stormwater runoff, those could be some substantial savings every time it rains. In this instance, it's $8,600 every time it rains. Well, in 2020, we had over 50 rainfall events that were greater than 1/10 of an inch. And so, that can add up. And so that's helpful for us to know. So some of the management strategies to maximize rainfall retention is to plant smaller trees under larger trees. So we can develop this forest-like environment where you have an overstory and a mid-story. And so as rain drips off of the canopy of those taller trees, the smaller trees can intercept more of that rainfall. And so it just maximizes that retention. Also use ground covers under those trees. Mulch and vegetation can add to storage of runoff. I know it's not popular in many places, or it's not even feasible in many places, especially in the extra urban environment, but where you can, use conifers and evergreen broadleaf trees, because this will give us year-round benefit. Plant trees that typically have greater leaf surface area is a good example, or a good strategy to use. And then, ensure proper tree maintenance to maximize the health and to maximize leaf area index. The other section that I want to talk about is this rainfall intensity. There hasn't been a lot of research done here in this field. Zabret did some work in Europe, and John Hathaway's group over in Knoxville at University of Tennessee is starting to look at this. But this gets into what Richard kind of talks about, is that dynamic storage. So dynamic storage is that storage that temporarily detains water in the canopy. That rainfall kind of bounces around in the tree canopy until it's released as throughfall. And so by keeping that water in the canopy, we can reduce the rainfall intensity under tree canopy. As Zabret found, this could be as much as 70% or so. In one particular case, in John Hathaway's work, we found under willow oak that it was almost 80% intensity reduction. But that's preliminary data, and I'm sure that those numbers, they're not as high. But still, it's kind of intuitive. We know that when we're caught in a rainfall event out in nature, the first place we go is under tree canopy cover, because it provides cover for us, some relief. So basically, this canopy cover acts as a volume control measure, and this can help us to increase the efficiency of our stormwater conveyance systems, or even some of those green infrastructure practices. So other strategies to help to reduce rainfall intensity is retain or plant trees with a greater leaf area index. Again, encouraging the use of conifers and evergreen broadleaf trees is a good one. Encouraging crown growth over impervious surfaces, because it's those impervious surfaces that you get very little stormwater benefits. That water just runs right off. So if we can use this tree canopy cover over impervious surfaces, like the image on the right, we can, help to reduce some of that runoff and the intensity of that water. And then also, when considering retrofitting catchments with green stormwater infrastructure, if you can, retain as much tree canopy cover in that catchment as possible, and use that canopy cover to reduce that intensity to that GSI practice. That will help maximize infiltration within those practices. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was transpiration, and Trisha did a great job of talking about all the ins and outs of that. It's very complicated, but there are some general rules of thumb that we could begin to use. This is highly dependent on those environmental environmental factors, species and wood architecture. But looking at some of the research, we have kind of developed some of these equations that can help us to at least begin to quantify the benefits of transpiration. And in the resource that we provide, we do have some of these equations that could help you. So if you know the species of trees that you have in a particular area and the general size, then you can start to quantify some of those transpiration benefits. Unfortunately, here in Nashville, yet we do not have that information, species and size information. We are looking to do this over the next several years, doing a plot-based analyses using something like an iTree Eco or something like that, so we can get its species and size distribution by watershed. But what I was able to do is use Trisha's information and some of her equations to look at transpiration by watershed. And so on the left-hand side is our tree canopy cover by watershed here within the county. As you can see, that the town center, it doesn't have a lot of tree canopy cover, and you see most of the development is over in the eastern part of the county. There hadn't been a lot of development on the west. So using that information, then we were able to get at the number of gallons transpired per acre per day within each of the watersheds using some of the existing equations. And so what this will do is this could help us to plan for tree planting events or plan where to retain as much canopy cover as possible. So some management strategies to maximize transpiration. First of all, is to ensure adequate below ground aeration. Roots need oxygen to respire. So if we could get water into these areas that have a lot of macro pore space, roots can not only respire, but it can store water. and so those trees can utilize that water for transpiration. Retain larger trees in the landscape where it's appropriate, where you can, and plant larger statured trees. So as Trisha mentioned, that larger trees provide the greatest amount of benefit. And so here's some more specific is planting trees that have diffuse porous architecture, xylem architecture, in large open areas that tend to flood, or where we're directing stormwater. Let those trees wick that water out of the soil so that between rainfall events, we can store more water in those floodplains or those planned flood areas. And then plant the more ring porous species, the oaks and the elms and those drier upland sites, because they can tend to regulate themselves a lot better than the diffuse porous species. I think I've got some time to talk about this. So kind of going away from Nashville, wanted to share a little bit about a project that we did in Atlanta when I was with the Forest Service. We did an iTree eco study, and we were able to take our tree data and run it through various years worth of meteorological data. We looked at canopy cover and its effects in a wet year, say 2007, where we had, I'm sorry, that was a dry year, we had very little rainfall, in an average year in 2010 where we had about average rainfall, and then in a very wet year in 2013 where we had an abundance of rainfall. And we found that for annual rainfall interception, tree canopy cover really only intercepted about 2 to 3% of the total rainfall that fell on the city in those particular years. So it's noteworthy. It's kind of nominal. If you're just using trees for volume reduction with their canopy cover, it's probably not the best strategy for using trees. But when you couple that with transpiration, we see that for transpiration, we can increase water storage underground and reduce volume by another 6 to 15%. So when you couple these two together, we're looking at annual benefits of between 8 and 18% that our urban forest is providing for stormwater mitigation. So I thought that was noteworthy. So as I wind up, some key points to remember for stormwater management: to maximize leaf surface area, plant species that tend to have dense canopies. To maximize leaf surface area, plant shade-tolerant species under larger trees if you can. Maintain mulch and vegetation under canopy to get more volume control. And incorporate conifers and evergreens in the landscape where you can, because that way you'll get year-round volume control. Ensure adequate below-ground aeration to improve, you'll want to improve soil health so that we can get more infiltration of this stormwater runoff into the soil where the trees can use it. So use suspended pavement systems in those extra urban areas where you can afford them. And then lastly, encourage canopy growth over impervious surfaces so that you can slow that water down over some of the impervious surfaces. So I just wanted to include where you can find these two resources, the Urban Forest Systems and Green Stormwater Infrastructure is a resource manual for urban foresters, and here's a link for that. I think we'll also have that link available in online here. And then incorporating forestry into stormwater management programs from the Water Research Foundation. The link is here, and that's geared more towards the stormwater engineers. So that's all I have, and I think that we've saved some time for questioning. So Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you.